What are some ridiculous history facts? In 1895, the entire state of Ohio had only 2 cars. Both cars managed to still smash into each other. And this is why we had 55 miles per hour as our maximum speed limit for so ducking long. /s. 101 years ago, a massive tank of molasses burst open in Boston, causing a sticky wave that killed 21 people and injured well over 100. The Great Molasses Flood link. Wikipedia. org/wiki/great_molasses_flood spread at about 35 miles per hour. Now that's what I call a sticky situation. Abraham Lincoln's son, Robert Todd Lincoln, was present at 3 different presidential assassinations. After McKinley, he decided not to accept any more invitations. Also, Robert Lincoln's life was saved by John Wilkes Booth's brother, Edwin, a famous actor, who pulled him out from a train that was about to drag him under its wheels. Link. Historinet.com/Edwin Booth saved Robert Todd Lincoln's life too. HTM. When Alexander the Great was a child, he was reprimanded by a teacher for wastefully throwing 2 whole fistfuls of rare incense into a sacrificial fire. When he was an adult and captured Gaza, which happened to be the prime agricultural source of the incense he wasted, he sent home 18 tons of it home to the same teacher as a gift. Was that to have some of this valuable incense? Or it's not so rare after all? Is it? More like a duck you. Alexander. So great I added it to my name. The first known political cartoon is Egyptian and shows Hatshepsut, the only woman pharaoh, pegging her lover and chief architect Senmut. There's a children's book called The Pharaoh's Secret that kinda gets into this. Interesting book. The entire country of Malta was awarded the George Cross for its efforts in WWII. It's still on their flag. Interestingly enough, it sounds like the conditions for the awarding of the cross are kind of similar to how the Knights Hospitaller operated back in the Sword and Shield days. If you're unfamiliar, they were more or less a precursor to the Red Cross and the first real paramedics. Karl Marx's great-great-grandson has a YouTube video of him doing parkour called ! I watched it, and it's not actually bad or anything, just funny considering his lineage. Former US President Andrew Jackson was approached by a man who pulled a gun on him. Smaller history fact: this was the first assassination attempt on a US president. The man pulled the trigger and the cap went off, but the gunpowder failed to light. The man pulled a second gun and fired, but the gunpowder again failed to light. The assassin tried to get away, but not before Andrew Jackson got him and beat the shit out of him with a cane. He also once won a duel by simply letting the other guy shoot him. He knew it would be a hastily aimed shot and probably not deadly, so he let the other guy just straight up shoot him. Then he carefully aimed and shot the other guy dead right there. He recovered from the wound rather quickly as well. Potatoes were not very popular as a food in France, like they were seen as fit only for animals. Not only that, but they were considered generally not digestible by humans. So a pharmacist named Parmentier knew they were good food and wanted to popularize them among the working class. So he got a 2-acre farm to grow potatoes and placed armed guards around it at all times. People assumed armed guards meant something very valuable was growing there, so they began to steal the potatoes. That's how potatoes became popular in France's working class. He also told his guards to accept bribes and to not actually catch anyone. Man, that seems like such a good job. Your job is to guard this area, but don't actually guard it. Just look like you are. It's like me right this second using Reddit while at work. People know no different, and it looks like I'm looking up important information. I'm not. During the Cold War, there was an idea to drop XL condoms labeled medium onto the Soviets to make them think we were anatomically superior and be more afraid of fighting us. Easily my favorite part of American history. Whoops, I dropped my monster condom for my Magnum darn. Pepsi once had the 6th largest military in the world after the price of Russian vodka couldn't cover their deal for Pepsi products. So they traded 17 submarines, a frigate, a cruiser, and a destroyer for a trade deal. Fun fact: the president of PepsiCo at the time, told the national security advisor, "We are disarming the USSR faster than you are." Gorbachev appeared in a Pizza Hut commercial. Gorbachev was a fool. His whole country fell apart because of his gross incompetence and the completely foolish belief that anyone could out-Pizza the Hut. Hitler, Stalin, Trotsky, Freud, and Tito were all living in the same area of Vienna in 1913. General Omar Bradley was stopped by MP during the Battle of the Bulge in WW2 due to them thinking he was a Nazi infiltrator. The irony was that he was stopped because he correctly identified the capital of Illinois as Springfield when the officer thought it was Chicago. I've met plenty of people who thought Chicago was the capital of Illinois just because it's our most populated city. Montenegro technically was in war with Japan for 101 years and they signed a peace treaty in 2006. Montenegro was allied with Russia in Russo-Japanese War and they declared war on Japan, but they forgot to peace. Not the only time this happened in history. The Scilly Islands were at war with the Netherlands for quite a while. If I recall correctly, edit, Wikipedia link, some people dispute it. But here's a wiki link. Link. M. Wikipedia. org/wiki_HUNDRED_FIVE_REVEARS%27. War further edit. List of similar wars. Link. M. Wikipedia. org/wiki/list_of_wars_extended_by_diplomatic_irregularity. In 1967, Australian Prime Minister Harold Holt disappeared while swimming in the ocean. He was presumed drowned. So naturally that year we named a swim center after him in memoriam. Edit, added his name. Which I meant to do when I wrote the post, but obviously my brain snapped midway through the sentence and I forgot it. Harold Holt. It should be added that he was a keen outdoorsman and a spear fisherman. He was a very good swimmer and would often swim out deep at the beach. The day of his disappearance there was others with him, but only one other swimmer who felt an undertow and decided it was too dangerous to go out. Holt swam out and was reported to have appeared as though he was caught in an undertow, but didn't struggle or wave for help. Then he just disappeared into the surf. There are lots of conspiracies about what actually happened to him, but nothing concrete ever has been found. He just disappeared forever. He swam out to a sandbar, donned his fins and rebreather, and swam 2 miles out to a waiting ship filled with all the looted silverware from the Prime Minister's mansion. He then embarked to Middle-earth where he lives like a king to this day. Henry Cavendish, the man who was vital in the discovery of gases and discovered hydrogen. He inherited a ton of money from his uncle and built a special castle. I think he was incredibly introverted, so it was designed so that he never had to meet or see any of his servants. He communicated with them through notes only. He did, however, appreciate other scientists coming to visit and talk. His works mostly came after his death, of course, but I found this guy interesting. In ancient Egypt, servants were smeared with honey to attract flies away from the pharaoh. That's so dumb. Why not just put the honey on a statue or something? I mean, you'd still need servants to carry the statue around, so just skip the middleman. I'm imagining this was for when they were out and about. There used to be bread stamps burned into a cooked loaf of bread to avoid bread fraud, as the government supplied the wheat/flour, but some bakers tried to use sawdust and other ingredients in the bread to make the wheat last longer. The bread stamps were baker specific, so they could track down where any tainted bread came from. If they were caught, they had to move to another town to make bread, or wait 3 years to continue making bread, if I remember correctly. Bread laws were huge throughout most of history. Nowadays, the idea of the government so strictly regulating an industry that they are forced to sell at a certain price seems odd. But in a time when food shortages were always a danger and food reserves were slim, bread becomes a very important commodity. It's how the Roman emperors kept Rome quiet despite the fact it was such an absurdly huge city. Literally bread and circuses. Free bread, free water, and free entertainment. The government forcing a product to be sold at a certain price seems odd. It exists today in the US. Milk at state minimum. Signs on storefronts everywhere. Yes. States I've lived in set a minimum price that milk can be sold at. Don't know if the entire US does, but that's been my experience. Colombia has a period in history literally called the dumb homeland period because of how incredibly dumb politicians acted at the time. How long ago? 180 years more or less. But yes, some say it never stopped. Before Abraham Lincoln became a politician, he was a /0 champion wrestler with more than 300 bouts under his belt. Lincoln only lost one match in his career and was inducted into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame in 1992. He also jumped out of a window in order to prevent a quorum. Defenestrated himself. Herostratus is the guy who burned down the Temple of Artemis. The only reason he did it was to have his name written down in history. A law was also passed that made it illegal to write down his name for just that reason. Obviously, it is not enforced in modern times. That's where you're wrong, bucko. You're going to jail. At one time there was not only a pope and an anti-pope, but also a counter-anti-pope. If a pope and an anti-pope meet, do they annihilate each other? Thomas Jefferson and John Adams died on the same day, July 4th, 1826, the 50th anniversary of them both signing the Declaration of Independence. Adams's last words were, "Thomas Jefferson survives." He was wrong by about 5 hours. Kinda not wrong, if you think about it. Thomas Jefferson's legacy better outlived Adams. More people can usually tell you that Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence and/or was a president than people even know John Adams was a second president. In fact, I think I've heard more people very wrongly refer to him as is he the one that made the beer than know he was the second president. The first bomb dropped on Berlin by the British during WW2 claimed no human casualties, but it did kill an elephant. Never forget. Pythagoras drowned a student to death because the student proved the existence of irrational numbers which contradicted Pythagoras and his cult's, the Brotherhood, beliefs. Well, duck his stupid theorem then. His theorem can be derived from Ptolemy's theorem, so his is inferior. The Battle of Bull Run, during the American Civil War, was called the Picnic Battle because so many civilians from Washington went on picnics on the sidelines and watched. But once the battle actually started, and the Union started to get its ass kicked, they all ran away, running over injured soldiers and dead bodies, and generally disrupting the battle. This was actually a relatively common thing during the Civil War. I know it happened at Gettysburg too. Claudius Drusus died in AD 20 from asphyxiation when he tossed a pear in the air and caught it in his mouth. The pear tree was put on trial, found guilty of murder, and destroyed. 2 important questions. 1. How large was this man's throat? 2. How small was this pear? It might not be true. Suetonius tells us this story and he lived more than 50 years after Claudius Drusus died. It's also totally possible that he was actually murdered by a man named Sejanus who was a pretty notorious figure in the early empire. We will probably never know what really happened to him. A lot of high profile deaths surrounding the royal family, for lack of a better term, from around this time, that have wacky stories behind them, or at least there are suspicions and there were suspicions at the time, that their deaths weren't entirely natural. Heirs to the throne under Augustus and Tiberius had a habit of dying young. When the Romans laid siege to Themyscira, a real place weirdly enough, they attempted to tunnel into the city. The Themyscirans released bears into the tunnels. Thus tunnel bear was invented. Ancient Greek and Roman marble statues were actually originally painted and were colorful. A lot of the statues' paint faded away and went away over time. Some people cleaned off the paint thinking it was debris or dirt, and other people just plain cleaned and removed all of the paint off of them because they preferred the look of white marble. Rome was actually a very colorful city, and it wasn't all made of just boring plain white marble. I'm taking a course in classical archaeology and it's almost painful to sit through my professor discuss what the early archaeologists did. How about that paleontologist who blew up an entire dig site just to prevent his rival from excavating it? There are literally entire books of anecdotes of this sort on Ben Franklin. That man was the og of trolling. He was so good at trolling under the pen name of a female. Silence Doggett. He received several marriage proposals. Only then did he reveal her true identity. Original catfish. As Saint Lawrence was roasted to death on a gridiron, he is said to have remarked to his torturers, "I'm cooked on this side, turn me over." Saint Lawrence is a patron saint of cooks and comedians. The first comedy roast. I bet Jeff Ross was there. The death of Cato. He killed himself by ripping out his internal organs one by one. When he passed out, the Roman doctor sewed his wound shut, but for just a few seconds, he woke back up and tore the organs out again. The shortest war occurred between Zanzibar and the British Empire, lasting around 45 minutes. Both the British and the Zanzibar Sultanate fielded a couple thousand men with a few boats. However, the war ended with a single Brit wounded. Meanwhile, the Zanzibarians suffered 500 dead or wounded, including civilians, and their entire navy, a yacht, 2 boats and a shore battery, gone. The British once sent a guy to China as a spy, so he would uncover the secrets of making tea. The British did as they pleased back in the day. When the Netherlands was occupied by Renaissance in 1940, many people fled to Canada, including Princess Juliana of the Netherlands /Zazero and her husband /Zazero Prince Bernard of Lippe-Beesterfeld. Their daughter, Princess Margriet, was born in Ottawa, not knowing if the baby would be male, and hence the heir to the throne. Canada declared the maternity ward of the Ottawa Hospital extraterritorial, which means it became international territory. This meant that the baby would derive its nationality only from its mother, making it 100% Dutch. Ancient Romans would put sandals on the hands of sleeping people, then tickle their face, so they would slap themselves. Ancient Romans were always up to some shit. Romans used to wash clothes in urine, because urine contains ammonia, a powerful bleaching agent. Ancient Romans used to wash their clothes in pee. At many street corners there were public urinals that men could use, and their contents were collected every day and brought to the laundries. Edits. Formatting. They really were. During the most critical portion of WWII, the Japanese thought they had sunk or disabled 3 American carriers when, in reality, they had only bombed the US Yorktown 3 times. They were caught with their pants down when the bombs started landing at Midway. The documentary The Greatest Events of WWII in Color has a very nice episode about the Battle of Midway. Highly recommendable. Edit. It's on Netflix. Edit 2. Purple Sailor pointed the real name of the documentary out. I just watched this yesterday. Looking back at some of the incompetence that led to a lot of these major WWII events is mind-boggling. If just one simple change happened, or one simple decision was altered, our entire history as we know it would be different. At US President Andrew Jackson's funeral in 1845, his pet parrot had to be removed because it was swearing. Edit. Lots of interest. Looks like someone went ahead and birthed a subreddit that's dedicated to TR stories. Join us over at /r/TR stories for more. And NBSP. There are a few pretty common stories about Theodore Roosevelt that get circulated on Reddit fairly regularly. Over the past few years, I've become, in some ways, addicted with the 26th president and his more than fascinating life. To the chagrin of all my family and friends, I've taken it upon myself to read as much as I possibly can about the man and share some of the lesser known stories with them. So here are some of my favorite. Also, currently at work, so these are mostly from memory. Also sorry for posting the same story twice. Writing in a Google Doc then copying it over, so work doesn't think I'm diddling on Reddit all day. Other TR enthusiasts, please let me know if anything's wrong and I'll update. Here's one. During the 1901 Republican nominations, TR was unanimously voted to be the vice president except for one vote. His own. He was adamant about not becoming the VP because he claimed it is a stepping stone to nothing but oblivion. The big Republican bosses figured he could actually do the least amount of damage as the VP because every other role TR ended up in he would make it powerful and gain more popularity. Senator Hanna said to McKinley when TR became the VP that your only duty to the country is to live for 4 years. McKinley was, of course, shot and killed, making TR the youngest president ever to serve the nation. One more, not many people knew about his relationship with the Emperor of the Badlands, Antony Amédée Mary Vincent Mancadi Vallombrosa, the Marquis de Moors, a Frenchman who wanted to gain the throne in France and was raising money by doing all sorts of schemes in the Dakotas. He nearly challenged TR to a duel and TR confined to his friend that he would have chosen long rifles at 7 paces because the Marquis was a better duelist. The Marquis quickly backed off because the long rifle at 7 paces would put the barrel against each of their chests. While also in the Badlands, his boat was stolen and he famously tracked the robbers down after a harrowing 3 days on the nearly frozen Little Missouri River. Once he found these men, he disarmed them and captured them. They were a known group and wanted all around the country. Now TR could have hung them on the spot, but he insisted they get proper justice and instead carted them 150 miles to the nearest town. During this trek, he became friends with the bandit leader and exchanged books and thoughts on the books the men had. TR stayed awake, watching the men for nearly 4 days straight, and returned them to the proper authorities. He received $50 and was technically a bounty hunter. I can't remember exactly, but I don't think any of them were hung. He would also read a book a day while president, and could memorize entire passages and pages. This was amazingly helpful because he would plan a meeting, read about the subject, and become an expert on the matter almost overnight. And NBSP, edit, people are asking for more. So here's one more. While exploring the river of Dubbed, a completely ludicrous adventure in itself, TR contracted malaria and had a high fever for a few days. Prior in the expedition, TR made everyone promise that if anyone was sick or injured that they wouldn't jeopardize the safety of the rest of the group and leave them behind. Well, no one could justify leaving TR behind, so they carried him along. At one point, he became so sick that he began deliriously repeating this line over and over again for days. In Xanadu, did Kubla Khan, a stately pleasure dome decree. It was the opening line to a poem, where the next line read, where Alf the sacred river ran, through caverns measureless to man, down to a sunless sea. This is from memory. I'm on mobile, so it might not be perfect. I have a bunch more. If people are interested, the Library of Congress recently releases presidential trove of letters. TR wrote over 250,000 letters, and none of these are transposed. I've been going through, finding the coolest ones, transcribing them, and recording them. I've discovered some awesome stories after reading nearly 7,000 of them. Here's a funny one link. Look. gov/resource/MSS 38299. MSS 38299-410_0001_0132/SP = 16 and R = 0. 199. 0. 21. 0. 817. 0. 413. 0. Where Roosevelt is criticizing President Wilson for not fighting in WWI and NBSP. Edit one last one. You guys are making my day. It's literally my favorite hobby to drink a beer and tell these stories. TR had a really great relationship with Booker Washington, a Southern black professor, who TR invited to the White House and became the first black man to ever dine there. TR, as you can imagine, got a lot of backlash for this. And Washington sent a clipping from the Baltimore Herald that recounted a true story of his, Washington's, encounter with their elderly Southern colonel. It went as follows. "Sup, I'm glad to meet you," the colonel said. "Always wanted to shake your hand, sup, I think. Sup, you're the greatest man in America." Washington modestly replied that he thought President Roosevelt was the greatest man in America. "No, sup," roared the old man, "not by a jugful. I used to think so. But since he invited you to dinner, I think he's a scoundrel." Roosevelt was vastly amused by this story and stated, "I think that is one of the most delightful things I have ever read. It is almost too good to be true." Apostrophe. A very high-ranking Nazi, Ernst R.H.M., was gay, was killed 1934, and Hitler knew about it. But it didn't bother him. Funny how homosexuals were then put in concentration camps. Hitler's Jewish family doctor helped his family through their financial struggle, while Adolf's mother was battling cancer, by reducing prices or not charging for medication at all. An 18-year-old Adolf Hitler would give him his everlasting gratitude for being generous to his family. This would show later, when the doctor wrote to Hitler after the annexation of Austria asking for his help, and Hitler put him under special protection. Not only was he not going to be targeted for being Jewish, but he'd be protected by the Gestapo until he could emigrate to the US. A Chinese emperor escaped an assassin by running around a pillar. After 2 hours, the assassin got bored and went home, and wasn't charged for his crimes. He actually didn't get away. Jing, the assassin, failed in the attempt. The emperor ran around the pillar until he had an opportunity to draw his sword out of his extraordinarily large and unpractical robes to then injure the leg of Jing. After this, the emperor got enough distance to Jing so that the guards could imprison him. There was a no weapon near the emperor policy, so the guards didn't dare to come closer to rescue him. Edit. Thanks for this correction. Apparently there wasn't a 2-hour chase around a pillar. I'm yet to find out what was instead. Also, we got a bear in mind. This was 200 BC. The sources are probably a little blurry when it comes to accuracy, although Wikipedia does seemingly look quite detailed on this topic. Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.